Welcome to Village in Motion this Tuesday, July 31st. I'm Clint Lambert, the host today, and I have in the studio with me at this time Jim Coulter, who is Green Springs wine expert, wine enophile, our guru about wines, and lots of other names he's been called along the years. But we will be talking about summer wines, and Jim, glad to have you with us.
It's good to be here. Can't wait to hear what some of those other names are.
You've heard a few over the years. Tell me, what is special about summer wines?
Well, of course, summer is the time a lot of us get outside, run around picnicking, traveling, sitting on the patio. It's a different temperature, different type of food. So there are some wines that go a lot better, chilled wines, right, especially, for example, ice cold Riesling or ice cold Chardonnay. And then the food is lighter, lots of sandwiches or salads, things like that, right, cold soups. So the flavor profiles of the wines and the food you want to be compatible, which could mean they could be opposite or similar or right, bring out nuances in the food. Okay. A lot of wines that are sold primarily in the summer are rosé wines because they're usually served cold. They travel well. They don't need a lot of aging, so you can buy them in April and drink them all up by August or September. Right. Unless you're in the southern hemisphere and you do it the other way around. But it's a marketing niche that's really taken off in the last few years. There was an article in the Washington Post a couple of weeks ago about fraud going on in France, about the French are buying up a lot of Spanish rosé wines at 40 cents a liter in bulk.
Wow.
And then some of the French companies were bottling those and selling them as French wines or looking like French wines, which basically cost twice as much right, in quantity. So they've had three or four companies over there that are now being charged with fraud and fined.
False advertisement.
And so, right. They didn't know when they wrote the article a couple of weeks ago whether any of those had been exported to the U.S., but a big market for it apparently was getting to the summer question. The sidewalk cafes in right, Paris where you order a glass of rosé, right, and whether you're getting it from Provence or from Spain or getting some white grape juice that somebody's added some color to. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to fraud this, and people in the cafes would be paying, especially if they're American tourists who don't know anything. They'd be paying a lot of money for cheap Spanish wines, which is why mostly what I buy in the summer is cheap Spanish wines to start with.
I thought you bought cheap ones anyway.
Yeah, but especially if you go to Spain or Portugal, Italy, Australia, there's a lot of wines from reputable producers, that especially rosé wines, which are not all that popular here, among cognoscenti. Right. You can still get $3.99, $4.99 bottles of really nice tasting rosé wines. And if you're going to a picnic, you don't really care if it's a great wine or not. You just care that it's inexpensive and tastes good.
You mentioned the fact of chilled rosé, chilled Chardonnay.
Yeah.
Typically, white wines are chilled something.
Right.
Are these chilled more than the
normal? It's a matter of taste. I know people who prefer their white wines and red wines both about the same temperature, which would be what in Europe they call cellar temperature, because the basements of old castles over there, it was 55 degrees, and that's about the right temperature for red wines. Okay. White wines, if you chill any wine too much, it depresses the flavor profiles of the wine. A lot of the cheap white wines that I buy, I really, really, really make them cold, because some of them don't taste so good if they're warmed up, because then the flavor profiles expand, and if the flavors aren't good to begin with, then you get more of that. Right. But usually, as I said, if you're picnic or you're eating outside, usually you want something cold to drink, ice cold beer, iced tea, lemonade, something that's served cold anyway. And so you'd usually chill the white wines down to 50, 45 degrees.
Okay.
Or if you're going on a picnic, chill them down to 35 degrees, and then by the time you get to the picnic, you open everything up, spread the baskets and stuff out, then they're up to like 50 degrees, but they're still refreshing.
Those of us living here at Green Spring, we typically do not have just a wine refrigerator.
That's right.
And we have the big refrigerator, and that's it. How can we go about chilling wines down to the temperatures we need?
I've found that the easiest way to do it is first of all, store them in a dark place with a stable temperature until you're ready to drink them. Like if you buy, like I do, buy wine by the case, put the case in a closet or just spread them on the floor under the bed where the bedspread covers it and keeps the sun off of them, and then put them in the refrigerator a day or two before. Like if I'm going to dinner tonight, I would have put a couple of bottles of wine in the refrigerator earlier this week. And then when I get ready to go to the dining room, I take it out. I put it in a little carry bag so that my fingers don't get frostbitten carrying it around. But take it to the dining room and sit outside the dining room and wait for your buzzer to go off and be called, or till your table is ready. And you go in, you sit down, ask the waiter for a wine glass to put on the table, and the wine glass comes, you open the wine, and you pour it, and by then it's been a half an hour, 45 minutes, depending on how crowded and what day of the week. And so the temperature of the wine has gone up from whatever your refrigerator is, 40 or 45, it's up around 50 degrees or so forth by that time, because you've been sitting out. And it's it's just about the right temperature at that time. And if you drink it real fast, then it doesn't get too warm.
Well, the other thing that I've seen is that I've seen individuals who will hold their hand around the bulb and just use body heat, right?
Yeah, and I've done that if the wine, especially if you go to a restaurant where usually what they do is they've got the wine stored someplace, and then when you order a bottle of it, they bring it out, they put it in a chilling, an ice cold thing that swirls water around it for 15 or 20 minutes to get it. So when you go to the restaurant and the sommelier pours you a little bit of tasting in the glass, if you think it's too cold or it's not cold enough, you tell the sommelier. But if it's too cold, usually what they'll do is they'll put the bottle in an insulated thing, and I usually say just leave it on the table and it'll continue to warm up. The other thing is what you said, you can pour a little bit of wine in your bowl and hold it and swirl it around a little bit, and that'll warm it up 3 or 4 degrees, and you can decide how long you want to do it to warm it up. And that's a way to quickly warm up your first glass of wine, and then the second glass will have been sitting on the table
for another 10 minutes, probably.
Well, not for me, but yes, for my wife, for example, it might sit there longer. But no, it's and so you can warm it up easier than you can chill it.
Right.
So that's why if it's pre-chilled, it's easier to let it warm up. And especially if you're in a restaurant, like here, you order your meal, and meanwhile the bottle is sitting there on the table, it's continuing warm. So after that first glass of wine, it may be 20 minutes when your food arrives, then again the wine is a little warmer.
And the reason in the summertime for chilling rosés and chardonnays and other white wines that you might be interested in is to bring it down to the temperature that you enjoy in the summer, right?
And as I said, usually in the summer, you like it a little colder, and that's why wines like Sauvignon Blanc and there's the Viognier and others. Viognier and Chardonnay probably a little bit warmer, but there are a lot of very austere, Pinot Grigio, for example, is a good example. You usually would drink those a little colder because there's not a lot of inherent flavor in those, unless it's a Sauvignon Blanc from Australia with that gooseberry kind of thing.
But there's typically less body in a white wine.
There's usually less flavor in some of the Chardonnays. Now you get a big oaky Chardonnay from California. You want that warm enough that those flavors and aromas come out.
But those people that like oak.
Yeah, but most people, if you're going to be drinking wine, you'll know which ones you like and what flavor you like them at, and it's always a really good exercise to buy a case of wine and then drink put them all in the refrigerator, and then take some out an hour before, 2 hours before, whatever. Something like champagne with bubbles in it. While you want to have that as cold as possible, to keep the bubbles. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's all, if you like your red wines ice cold, then drink them ice cold. If you like your white wines 72 degrees, drink them at room temperature. There's no hard and fast rules. If you go to a restaurant, the sommelier might have a heart attack if you have it served at the wrong temperature. Or the chef might come running out and says, you can't eat my food with wine at that temperature. But if you're doing it at home or here at Green Spring, you do what you want to do.
Right. And it's purely the taste of the individual.
Yes.
I mean, everybody has their own taste, things they like and dislike, and same thing with wines just in general.
No, that's right. Some people love big juicy steaks. Other people don't even eat red meat.
Right.
Some people like fish. Some people like fowl. There's no hard and fast rules as to how people should. As long as you don't ask your cardiologist, there's no hard and fast rules about how you should live your life. That's one of the things that I find so much fun about food and wine is there's a lot of things you can mix and match together, and doing that in a lot of restaurants now. A lot of chefs are doing traditional recipes for foods with ingredients or elements to their preparation that are entirely outside the box, and they're experimenting with stuff like that, and it's a lot of fun to go with those. And good restaurants that have a sommelier, the sommelier will be matching the food to the chef's presentation, and they'll go through experimental tastings to see what things go together best in the opinion of the sommelier. And his taste buds hopefully are more educated than mine, but could be different. He may say this is great, and I think it doesn't taste so great. But until I've tried his, I don't know that he might not be right.
Okay. So, watch out for the French wines.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. Secret, if you want to buy French wines, is look at the label, see if there's any tiny print on there that says it's a European wine rather than a French wine. Find out if it's from a recognized winery, and it says produced and bottled at the winery. Okay. Because if it says if it's bottled at the winery, that means that they bought the grapes from someplace else. Right. And then you want to find out by reading the label, hopefully, where that other place was. And if it says, Spanish wine, and there's a lot of big producers all over the world that do that. They buy grapes from other growers, and sometimes from other. I know there's Pepperwood Grove is a $5.99, $6.99 wine here, and every couple of years they'll change the source for their Pinot Noir. It's come from Australia, it's come from the U.S., it's come from Chile, and they go where they can get the best price on a bulk purchase of this stuff, and then they bottle it, and that's what they sell that year.
So what they do is they simply are buying the juice.
Yeah, and then they're making it. Sometimes they'll buy the finished wine and they'll just bottle it and sell it. But it'll say on their product of Australia or product of Chile, and that's perfectly straightforward. It's good marketing practice.
But that's happening also throughout the states with different wineries in different states that are buying other people's grapes.
Yeah, it's happening with everything. You have people in the U.S. that are producing products that they're buying steel from China or overseas someplace, and then they bring the raw steel in here and they turn it into products. That happens with everything. Automobiles now, you get pieces and parts made all over the world that are brought here and assembled.
But with wines, it's happening with wines. Simply the fact of being aware of it, read the labels, and recognize what's going on.
Yeah, there's no substitute for being an educated consumer.
There you go.
And if you know what to look for, a reputable producer of any product will indicate the origin of the products that are in there.
Well, there was a producer in California who's no longer with us, right?
Dennis Horton. Yeah, he's from Virginia.
Oh, from Virginia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He passed away in June, and he was only 72 years old, and he'd been sick for some time. But the interesting thing about Dennis Horton is that he's one of the early proponents of Virginia as a wine growing place. He did experiments with all kinds of different grapes that he brought in from all over the world, because he recognized, and his winemakers, the people that work for him, recognized that Virginia is a very wet and humid environment, and the traditional great grapes like Cabernet Sauvignon and Chardonnay didn't do as well here as grapes that had thicker skins and looser bunches where the air could get in to help prevent mold and rot. Viognier was his first big success. He won a wine tasting in California against California wines with his Viognier.
And he brought Viognier in, right?
Yes, he brought the cuttings in from that. He was an early proponent, along with Jenny McLeod at Chrysalis Vineyards, of the Norton grape.
And Chrysalis is out off of US 50?
Yeah, Middleburg, yeah. And Horton's Winery is still in business. His wife and family are running it now, and they're down near Charlottesville.
Right.
And the good thing about him is that he was not an expert in wine. He just was willing to take chances. He brought in all manner of different grapes from all over the world and grew them. He said at one point, he said he'd probably torn out more grapevines than most people in Virginia had ever planted.
Yeah, right.
But he said he'd rather be lucky than good.
Yes.
And he kept planting different varieties. If you go to his winery now, the last time I was down there was a couple of years ago, they had like 65 or 70 different varieties you could taste in the tasting room. And his work with the Norton grape and the Viognier grape, those are now the two grape varieties that are most identified with Virginia. Although there are several others that are also doing very well in this state. But Viognier is like the state grape.
Viognier was originally grown in France?
Yes. It was grown in France, and now it's being grown in a lot of places in the world. It's big in California now. Viognier is basically like a Chardonnay.
Yes.
It's got a little bit more of a honey type finish to it, but if you chill it enough, you can't hardly tell the difference. But it's a very good wine.
For my palate, it's milder.
Yes.
Than a Chardonnay.
It's usually not made with a lot of oak like some people do Chardonnays, but it's a very good white wine, and it's not terribly expensive. Like I said, you can buy Viogniers from Virginia or from California or lots of other states. They grow them overseas in France. I forget what the region in France was, where it's a predominant white grape, but it's a very acceptable, quality grape.
You mentioned Horton's vineyard and his winery, and it's Gordonsville, isn't it?
Yes, Gordonsville,
where
Virginia.
it actually is, and that's outside of Charlottesville,
Yep.
Going down, and they have a vineyard right in front of the winery.
Yes, they do.
And the story that I heard from someone in the winery was that Mrs. Horton decided she had tasted Rickett's-Telly wine, and she really liked it, and she decided she wanted to plant it. So she ripped out his Viognier that was out front and planted Rickett's-Telly.
That's the story I heard too.
Yeah, and it is a superb wine.
And the best part about that is that you go to visit a lot of wineries, especially in Virginia, where there's now close to 300 wineries in Virginia, but a lot of them they do their marketing out of a building that's built near a highway, where they can have easy access to their customer base. It's always nice when you go visit a winery, if you drive up to the winery and you see grapevines growing around it, which is nice. So they right in front of the Horton Winery, they've got probably an acre in front of there. Instead of a front lawn with statues and so forth, they got actual rows of grapevines planted there, so you have the feeling that you're in. Because a lot of places, the winery either owns property elsewhere in the state, or they buy their grapes from farmers who are in the grape growing business. So if there's not grapevines around the property, then you wonder, well, do they grow any of their own grapes? And sometimes they may have 40 acres someplace else that's chock full of grapevines, but they're not right there in front of the winery. So it's nice to see it there.
It really is, and Chrysalis is a prime example.
Yes, Chrysalis is down some little gravel road, like 2 miles off the main street,
Yeah.
but you get there and it's surrounded by it's surrounded on 3 sides
Three
by
sides,
grapevines and 1
grapevines.
side by a parking lot.
Exactly, exactly.
But it's a good visit.
It's really a nice setting, and it shows that they really are growing
Yeah.
grapes as well as producing
And
wine.
Chrysalis has got they've got a place now where they have a party room and cookouts areas and so forth. So there's a lot of wineries in Virginia now that they're getting into the more into the commercial end of things.
So if you want to stay local, buy Virginia wines, right?
Exactly.
And
They're still hard to find.
Yeah.
The best and easiest way to find Virginia wines is to get in your car and go out and drive to Leesburg or Middleburg or Charlottesville and get yourself one of the Virginia maps, and you can go out, leave 9 o'clock in the morning and be out there at 10 when the winery's open. You can go visit 3 or 4 wineries,
Right.
take some sample tastes, buy some bottles of wine from the winery, because the wineries have to, by Virginia law, they have to sell at the full list price.
Right.
So if they have them at total, you can buy them and save a couple of dollars a bottle.
Right.
But there's not that much demand for Virginia wine, so places like Total and Safeway and Whole Foods don't usually stock more than maybe one very popular, widely available brand of wine. And Horton makes a lot of wine, so if they have Horton wine, they may have 1 or 2 kinds instead of the one you can't find the Riquezzatelli in the store. You have to go to the wine. Now you can order it.
You can order it
and
right.
have it shipped to the front desk, and then you can take your hand truck and go down there and wheel it back to your apartment, which is easier than driving out there or taking a bus trip out there. But Special Trips, I know, runs stuff to wineries in the summer.
Special Trips is an excellent way
Yeah.
to go out and enjoy the day, go to a winery, see the process, taste some fine
have a
wines.
boxed lunch or something.
Yeah, have a lunch, and spend the day enjoying the countryside.
Yeah.
And especially between here and Middleburg and here in Leesburg area,
Centerville,
Centerville,
places like
all that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of nice little wineries.
Yeah, and you go to some place like Warrenton, there's restaurants and
Right.
shopping there and so forth. So you can hit a winery and do some shopping, have lunch.
Right.
It's a nice way to spend a day.
It really is. Other things going on in the wine industry? Other issues going on?
Well, I know tastes have been changing in the United States. There was an article a while ago that wine is now surpassed beer as our preferred wine, or not as our preferred wine for sure, but also as our preferred drink.
Right.
The other thing that's interesting is Wine and Spirits magazine in April had an article. They're basically, Wine and Spirits is a magazine that's more covers the restaurant and hospitality industry, and they made the point that with a lot of these farm to garden or locavore, local food things, that a lot of the sommeliers now are choosing wines to go on wine lists that are more compatible with that rather than just a steakhouse. You go to a steakhouse these days and you still get your Cabernet and Zinfandel and Pinot, your big heavy dark wines. You sit in your big cushy leather chair and spend a 4-hour meal there eating baked potatoes and steak and so forth. It's pretty much like heaven to me. But now the sommeliers are the point of the article that they had was that for the first time, the #1 wine on their wine list survey was a foreign wine. And they have wines from Greece, South Africa, a lot of places. Eastern Europe is very big, Romania and Slovakia. But the other thing was, which was worrisome to me, and I hope nobody from Erickson Living read the article, that the movements in restaurants, especially these types of restaurants, is toward harder chairs, louder music, fewer choices on the menu, all the kinds of things that we don't want to see here at Green Spring, but. Because they want to turn the tables over and get people to come in and order more wine. And I suppose if you're uncomfortable enough, 2 or 3 bottles of wine would help solve that problem. But it seems to go through this. I seem to remember back when I was a youngster that the restaurants all seem to be trying to get you in and out of there as quickly as possible. Then we went through this thing about, you know, we want to make you comfortable, and so you go to some restaurants, you have a reservation, well, you can have the table all night. Now they're back to trying to turn them over real fast. I suppose it all depends on you know, different ages of the owners of the restaurants, and so whatever they didn't like as a child, now they're going to fix it when they're an adult.
Exactly. But, you know, speaking of that, and one of the things that's happening throughout the DC area is new wine shops opening. Yep. New dining venues that specialize in fine foods, fine dining, and with wine. So
yeah. So it's the only thing I would say is if you read about some restaurant in a magazine or newspaper or so forth, call them and ask them if they take reservations. And ask them if they have a wine list. Right. Because some places, the big things now in a lot of these restaurants are they don't take reservations, so you can go there and stand in line outside for an hour and a half waiting to get in, which is a good reason for them to want to turn the tables over as fast as possible. But in our age group, I don't think we want to stand outside for an hour and a half in any kind of weather.
And so for our age group, and those of us living at Green Spring, go to dinner, order a glass of wine, take a bottle of wine with you, sit down and enjoy your dinner, and have a great time, right?
Yeah, and since there's nobody here from dining services right now, I would recommend you take a bottle of wine with you. You can buy one of these 3/4 of a liter bottle wine, and if you get one with a screw cap, you can unscrew it. Right. You can have a glass or two for dinner. You can screw the thing back up, take it home, put it in your refrigerator overnight, take it back to the dining room the next night, and drink the other 2 glasses in. It'll last 3 or 4 days in the bottle, just with the screw cap on, or put the cork back in it. You don't have to buy wine in the dining room if you were able to take your own.
Okay. Well, get your wine, enjoy it, and Jim, thank you so much as always for coming and sharing with us your knowledge of wines, and we greatly appreciate it.
The only thing I like more than wine is talking.
There you go. All right.